Chapter 17. The Dreams of the Gods. I take care of my world. The two sides to reality. From time immemorial, people have understood that the world has a dual nature. On the one hand, everything that happens on the material level can more or less be understood and explained from the point of view of the natural sciences. On the other hand, when we encounter phenomena from the subtle planes, the laws cease to be applicable. Why is it that we are unable to unite different aspects of reality in a single knowledge system? It is a strange picture. It is as if the world plays hide and seek with humanity, not wishing to reveal its true essence. Hardly have science discovered a law to explain one phenomenon, that a new phenomenon is observed that seems to contradict it. The search for the slippery truth is like a shadow so long it goes on forever. The interesting thing is that the world is not only hiding its true identity, it also readily takes on the image assigned to it. This is the case with all fields of the natural sciences. For example, if you imagine that an object of the micro world is a particle, then there will undoubtedly be experiments to prove it. If you imagine that it is not a particle, but an electromagnetic wave, the world will not protest, but willingly reveal itself in the corresponding manner. You can ask the world what it is made of with equal success. If you ask whether the substance it is made up of is matter that has mass, it will reply yes. If you ask whether it is not, in fact, made up of energy, it will again answer in the affirmative. As you know, in a vacuum there is a continual process taking place of the birth and annihilation of microparticles as energy is transformed into matter and vice versa. There is no point in asking the world what is primary, matter or consciousness. It will cunningly change its masks, turning towards us with the side we wish to see. Representatives of different teachings will argue amongst themselves, trying to prove conflicting points of view, but reality comes up with its dispassionate verdict. Essentially, they are all right. So it turns out that the world does not just slip away from us, it agrees with us. In other words, it behaves like a mirror, in which literally all our ideas surrounding the nature of reality are reflected. So what are we left with? The world always agrees with our observations of it, and yet avoids giving us a direct answer. Are all our attempts to explain the nature of reality to be in vain? It is all actually much simpler than it seems. There is no point in searching for the absolute truth in individual manifestations of a reality that is multifaceted. We just have to accept the fact that reality is like a dual mirror that has two sides, one that is physical, that can be touched, and the other metaphysical, that lies beyond perception, but which is no less objective. At the present time, science deals with what is reflected in the mirror, while esotericism tries to peek at the other side. This is what the argument about the nature of reality comes down to. So what is hidden on the reverse side of the dual mirror? The alternatives space is what is to be found on the other side. That information structure in which the scripts of all possible events are contained. The number of alternative realities is infinite, just as the number of possible coordinate points on a graph. The alternative space records everything that ever was, is, or will be. The event that actually takes place in the physical world represents the material realization of one of those many alternatives. This might be difficult to believe. Where exactly is the alternative space? How can this be possible? From the perspective of the three dimensions, the alternative space is everywhere and at the same time nowhere at all. It could lie beyond the limits of the visible universe, or it could be in your coffee cup. Either way, it is not to be found in the third dimension. The paradox lies in the fact that we all go to the alternative space every night. Dreams are not illusions in the normal sense of the word. We carelessly attribute our dreams to the realm of fantasy without suspecting that they reflect real events which could have their place in the past or future. We know that in dreams people see pictures that do not seem to be of this world. Sometimes people see things in dreams that they quite obviously could never have seen anywhere before. If a dream is like the brain's imitation of reality, then where does it get these incredible pictures and stories? If we conventionally attribute the conscious aspect of the human psyche to the mind and the subconscious aspect of the human psyche to the soul, then you could say that dreaming is the flight of the soul into the alternatives space. The mind does not imagine its dreams, it genuinely sees them. The soul has direct access to the information field where all scripts and scenarios are permanently stored like frames on a film roll. The phenomenon of time, i.e., the development of events, appears only in the process of the film roll moving. The mind plays the role of observer and idea generator. Memory has the same direct relationship to the alternative space. It has already been proved that the mind is not physically capable of retaining all of the information it accumulates over a lifetime. So how does the mind memorize? Rather than retaining information itself, it keeps a kind of address for the data in the alternatives space. The mind is not capable of creating anything fundamentally new. It can only compile a new version of a house from old bricks. All scientific discoveries and masterpieces are received by the mind from the alternative space via the soul. Clairvoyance and intuitive knowledge are received in the same way and from the same place. No scientific discovery, wrote Einstein, is made by means of the logical mind. It only acquires logical form later when you describe it. Every discovery, even very small ones, are always an insight. The solution always comes from the outside and unexpectedly, as if someone had hinted it." End quote. The alternative space should not be confused with the popular concept of the common information field in which data can be shifted from one object to another. The alternative space is a stationary matrix, a structure which defines everything that is or that could possibly take place in the physical world. As yet, mainstream science is unable to explain or confirm the existence of the alternative space. Quite the opposite, in fact. Science will try to discredit the transurfing model, which is not surprising because official science is a typical pendulum. Generally speaking, science, for all its indubitable merits and achievements, is prone to brush to one side anything that does not fit into its framework. When it encounters anything that defies explanation, it wriggles every which way, accusing its opponents of being charlatans, of juggling the facts, or of simply ignoring the obvious. Anything to remain on its pedestal of granite. There was one person, however, academic, Vyacheslav Bronikov, who managed to completely snooker science by combining the totally incredible with the more than obvious. Children taught at the International Academy of Human Development, created by Bronik, demonstrate extraordinary abilities. These individuals are capable of seeing with their eyes closed just as well as when they are open. They can memorize huge volumes of information. They have gifts of clairvoyance and can perceive distant objects as clearly as through a telescope. It is difficult to believe, but a fact is a fact. They see through walls as if there were no obstacle there at all. How do they do it? Neurophysiologists who carry out research into the effect of direct vision describe their observations in the following way. In normal sight, the apparatus registers the area where the signal enters, its movement in the brain, and how it is processed. In the case of direct vision, the point of entry is not registered, and there is no apparent movement of the signal in the brain, and yet the equipment very precisely registers that the signal is processed. All attempts to block signal entry to the brain gave a negative result. We are discovering something that displays features totally unrelated to electromagnetic processes. It appears that the brain is capable of seeing without the means of the apparatus of sight, and that the way the information is received remains unknown. How should this be interpreted? Bronikov describes this phenomenon in terms of a connection, the conscious mind, and something he calls higher consciousness. Higher consciousness, he writes, lies outside of the human mind as a kind of environment. You have probably guessed already, in the context of transurfing, this environment is understood to be the alternatives space. It does not really matter how one refers to it, the essence remains the same. The mind, or if you prefer the brain, sees what is in the alternative space by means of the soul, whereas the eyes observe physical reality. In the case of direct vision, the brain attunes to the metaphysical information field where quite literally the entire mold of physical reality is stored. Once you have access to this bank of data, you can perceive objects irrespective of where they are physically located, behind a wall, under the ground, or many miles away. The alternative space consists both of areas that have been manifest as material reality and areas that have not yet been realized. In order to develop direct vision, you have to learn to perceive the current realized sector. From a physiological point of view, this could be interpreted as a certain synchronization between both hemispheres of the brain. Bronikov developed an entire system of special and at the same time very straightforward exercises enabling ordinary individuals to develop these abilities. If you want to, you can find relevant information on the internet and try it yourself. It is all very possible. The alternative space stores information about all possible alternatives of the past and future, which means that access to this field also develops the ability for clairvoyance. The only problem with clairvoyance is that an infinite number of alternatives exist, and so one can also see events that will never be realized in the physical world. This is why clairvoyants sometimes make mistakes in their prognoses, for they can also see things that have never been and things that will never happen. In this sense, you can rest assured that no one can know your future because no one can determine which alternative will eventually be realized. Likewise, there is no guarantee that in a dream you see the sector of the field which will become streamed into physical reality. This is great because it means that the future is not fatally predetermined, and we can continue to hope for the best. The task of transurfing is not to look at the past with regret or the future with uncertainty, but to intentionally create your own reality. Under certain conditions, human thought energy is capable of materializing a given sector of the alternative space. Under the condition that in transurfing is referred to as unity of heart and mind, the magical power of outer intention is born, which is what turns a possible future into reality. Everything that is usually associated with magic has a direct relationship to outer intention. It is with the help of this magical power that the ancients created the Egyptian pyramids and other similar miracles. This type of intention is called outer intention because it is located outside of the human being and is not subject to the human mind. True, in a certain condition, human consciousness is capable of gaining access to it. If you subject your own will to this mighty force, you can create unbelievable things. However, modern man has long lost the type of abilities possessed by the inhabitants of ancient civilizations such as Atlantis. Fragments of ancient knowledge have survived to the present day in the form of scattered esoteric teachings and practices. Applying this knowledge to everyday life is relatively difficult. And yet, it is not impossible. In transurfing, there are indirect methods which can help you get outer intention to work in other ways. People are capable of shaping their own reality, but you have to observe certain rules. Your ordinary state of mind tries unsuccessfully to manipulate the reflection in the mirror, whereas what you must do is change the actual image. The image is the focus and nature of your thoughts. In order to transform what is desired into reality, desire of itself is not enough. You need to know how to work with a dual mirror, and then you will learn how to create your own reality. You will have to finally undermine the monolith of so-called common sense, which in actual fact is not very commonsensical at all. If you can accept that two sides to reality exist simultaneously, the physical and the metaphysical, old stereotypes will crumble, and the picture of the world will become clearer. Dualism is an integral part of our reality. For example, the soul relates to the alternative space, and the mind to the material world. Inner intention relates to material reality, and outer intention to the virtual sectors of the alternative space. When these two aspects of reality connect on the surface of the mirror, phenomena arise that are referred to as paranormal or unexplained. An obvious example of the connection between the two sides to reality is the wave-particle dualism that occurs when a microobject behaves either as a wave or as a particle. The birth and annihilation of microparticles in a vacuum is another example of a borderline condition in which reality fluctuates between physical and metaphysical form. However, the most surprising example is human beings who simultaneously combine in ourselves the material and the spiritual. In one sense, you could say that we are living on the surface of a gigantic mirror, which has our material universe on one side and the black eternity of the alternative space on the other. In such a unique position, it would be at best short-sighted to live within the limits of the conventional worldview and use only one side of reality, the physical side. You will learn how to work with the dual mirror of the world and how to accomplish things that would previously have seemed impossible. You will be convinced yet that your potential is limited only by your intention. The waking dream. When a potential possibility is manifested as reality, the surface of the dual mirror shows a symmetrical image. The sector of the metaphysical alternative space lies on the other side of the mirror, and its material manifestation lies on the other. All living beings are balanced on the edge of the mirror because their body and mind relate to the material world, while their soul remains inseparably connected to the alternative space. We all came into this life from the alternative space, and we will all return to the alternative space, as if to the wings of a stage for a costume change, to then reappear on the surface of the mirror in a new guise. In this theater of masks, the actors return to a never-ending cycle of parts. Having played in one role, the actor runs backstage for a minute, puts on a different mask, and once again re-enters the game, having completely forgotten anything that happened prior to his latest appearance on stage. The actor is so immersed in the image of the character they are playing that they lose all sense of who they are as an individual. Sometimes the wool falls away from the actor's eyes and they suddenly become aware that this is not their first life here on the stage. Ian Stevenson, American professor of psychiatry, gathered more than 2,500 registered cases of remembered past lives, in which the majority of respondents were children. Without the medium of hypnosis, the children gave accounts of their lives in the distant past and in other countries. In his books, Ian Stevenson quotes extremely interesting facts. There was one particularly characteristic story of two twin brothers who spoke to each other in an unintelligible language. At first, everyone thought that it was just gibberish, until about the time they were 3 years old, when their parents finally realized that something was not right. The brothers were shown to linguists, who were surprised to find that the children were speaking to each other in Old Aramaic, a language widely spoken during the time of Christ, but which is today no longer spoken. Another example is of a Yugoslavian girl who became ill and was unconscious for a period of time. When she came around, she could no longer recognize the people around her and spoke in a foreign language. Specialists established that the language she was speaking was a Bengali dialect. The child asked to be taken home to India. When the girl was taken to the town she had named, she recognized her house. However, it turned out that the parents and the little girl had passed away long ago. There are numerous stories about children similar to these, but the same thing also happens to adults. A 27-year-old woman traveling with her husband through Germany was surprised to find that she recognized the places they were visiting, although she was there for the first time. She even saw her own home and could remember the names of her parents and brothers. At the local pub, the woman recognized an old man who had known her family and told her of the tragic accident in which a horse had kicked up one of its hooves and killed the family's little daughter. The woman expanded on his story in minute detail. In his book, Do We Only Live Once? And J. Dominorsky describes the experiments of an English psychiatrist, Arnold Blacksman, who used hypnosis to help patients return to past lives. One of his patients recounted in detail 6 past incarnations. In the first, she was the wife of tutor to a Roman alderman in England, and the wife of a Jewish usurer, then a servant girl in the house of a merchant in Paris. She was also a dame at the court of the Spanish Infante at Castile, a London seamstress, and a nun living in one of the states of America. And all these lives were lived over the course of 2 millennia. Historians carefully checked the dates and events she described and confirmed everything. If you consider all these facts, there can hardly be any doubt in the existence of reincarnation. There is just one thing that leaves me undecided. Why are cases of remembered past lives so rare and occur in such a small number of people? People mainly remember past lives in their early childhood, but with time they are erased from memory. To be more specific, it is not that memories are erased so much as that awareness is blocked. Everyone can remember their past incarnations if they wake up from the daydream of life. We know that up until the age of 4, a child is incapable of distinguishing a dream from reality. It may be that children can also recall their past lives, but the rational worldview is strongly imposed upon them before they become aware of it. Also, very few people have any memories before the age of 4. Why is this, do you think? Is it because the child is irrational and not self-aware? No, this is a great common delusion. For in reality, awareness in children is much higher than it is in adults. It is the adults who become immersed in the subconscious daydream and are as a result unable to recall their past lives or their early childhood. Let us look at how this happens. When the soul is reborn into a new body, it sits in the background while the mind takes the leading position. So what is the mind? From the moment of birth, the mind is a clean sheet of paper on which anything can be written. From the very beginning, a template is placed onto the sheet in accordance with which the individual perceives themselves and the reality of their day-to-day life. The more detailed the template is, the greater the chasm between the heart and the mind. an individual's awareness of reality will be exactly what they have been taught it should be. Awareness can be divided into two levels. The first is attention, and the second is perception. In the initial period after birth, perception has not been clouded by anything external, and so the child's ability for intuition and clairvoyance are wide open. In other words, the child has direct access to information from the alternative space and perceives the world just as it is. However, dream-seeing adults take the newborn in hand and immediately squeeze it into the narrow dream framework they take to be conscious existence. This is achieved by limiting the child's freedom and holding its attention on certain things. The child is forced to concentrate its attention on the attributes of reality. Look here, listen to me, don't do that, do this. Once the attention span is captured, the child's perspective is sharply narrowed. Awareness is lost and the individual sinks into a condition differing little from unconscious dreaming. In reality, when your attention is focused on a narrow range of objects, you walk as if your gaze was glued to your shoes, and so naturally, you do not look around you. The worldview template in turn places you in the Procrustean bed of false stereotypes which define how everything should be. In subconscious dreaming, the programming of attention and perception reaches its maximum level. The dreamer accepts the situation for what it is, suspecting they are impotent to affect the course of events. As a result, the dreamer finds themselves utterly in the hands of circumstance. The dream happens to them, and there is nothing they can do about it. The script develops spontaneously in accordance with one's fears and expectations, which continue with one's thought in an uncontrollable flow. In lucid dreaming, the dreamer has a higher level of awareness and can affect the course of events with their willpower. As soon as the individual grasps the idea that it is all just a dream, they develop incredible capacities. In conscious dreaming, there is nothing that cannot be accomplished. The dreamer can direct events and do inconceivable things, such as fly, and all because their attention and perception are freed. It is as if the individual has lifted their head up, looked around, and become aware of their position. In waking, however strange it may seem, one's level of awareness drops again. In the majority of cases, a person's thoughts fly spontaneously, jumping from one theme to another. The things that concern, worry, or irritate us are usually the things that control our consciousness, gnawing away at us to one degree or another. It can be difficult to control the flow of thoughts such as these. Our worst expectations and negative knee-jerk reactions shape a person's reality irrespective of their will. Perception and attention are held by problems, oppressive thoughts, and circumstances. As a result, a person becomes engrossed in their cares like in a daydream. This is how we become grown-ups. A mature person considers the child irrational in as far as they fail to fit with the dream. Naturally, the child has to learn how to survive in new conditions. Yet inevitably, the paradox arises. The more efficiently the child assimilates the rules of behavior within the narrow limits of the material world, the lower their level of awareness falls, which leads to a loss of capacity to influence the course of events and perceive the metaphysical side of reality. Grown-ups become prisoners of their own games and consequently of circumstances from the moment they begin to take them seriously, allowing their mind to become engrossed. The child, however, is the sole master of their game. They have a higher level of awareness because in every moment they know that it is just all a game. Likewise, the child keeps importance at a low level because they understand that it is just a game. The child acts dispassionately at the same time, observing like a spectator because, again, they are aware that it is all just a game. There are no more games for adults, though, for life is a very serious matter. On the one hand, this is true. On the other hand, this attitude changes human existence into an unconscious waking dream. Of course, the adult person is aware of the fact that in any given moment they are awake rather than asleep. Yet, does this really change anything? For desires are not fulfilled, dreams do not come true, and our worst expectations are confirmed as if despite us. Life unfolds randomly and not in the way we want it to. It turns out that the individual is master of their reality in lucid dreaming and yet is impotent in waking. It is all relative. The ability to control your dreams comes from being aware of yourself inside a dream relative to physical reality. At this level of awareness, the individual has the support and reference point of reality to which they can return after they have woken. Reality, in turn, is just like an unconscious waking dream in that life just happens. The individual does not remember their past lives, and they do not have a point of reference relative to which they can step up to the next level of awareness. In lucid dreaming, you remember who you really are. You are the person seeing the dream. You understand that the moment you wake up, the dreams will disappear, but that you can also remain in the dream and direct it with the power of your intention. Until such time as you become aware that you are seeing a dream and remember your point of reference, you are completely under the power of the dream. You are dependent on circumstances and closed in the box of conditioning. Reality differs from a dream in that you always return to it. In order to determine whether it is a dream or reality, you have to determine your point of reference because both the dream and reality are relative. Dreams are not real relative to reality. Relative to what, then, is reality itself unreal? Where is the reference point for reality? When a person dies, they return to this initial reference point, but every time they are reborn, they forget their starting point and become engrossed in the new dream, the next life. If you could remember who you really are, you would become conscious of the fact that you are capable of directing this dream, the dream that is life. This is incredibly difficult to do, and the difficulty lies in the fact that you have to change the template of your worldview. It is like a kind of stencil that has become rubber stamped into your mind, making it impossible to correct or erase. All you can do is create an additional one, and this requires tearing your mind away from the former. The mind can be torn away from its previous template when it is in an altered state of consciousness occurring during sleep or the impact of psychotropic agents. In a normal state of consciousness, the heart and the mind are synchronously attuned to a realized sector of the alternative space. The mind observes material reality as if it were looking through a window. In a state of alcoholic or drug-related intoxication, the mind releases its grip of control, disturbing the synchronicity and allowing the soul to deviate to an unrealized area of the alternative space. As a result, a person is physically present in the real world, but perceives it quite differently depending on the degree to which there is deviation from the former synchronicity. Simply put, a person under the influence of alcohol will find that their old familiar house or street has a weird look to it, like it is in a dream. This is because the person's mind observes the picture from close, but unrealized sectors of the alternative space, where the scenery is somewhat different. The content of these sectors can be anything. For example, a person simply cannot find the door because they cannot find where it was before. The place might appear a total mess as if it were being totally redecorated, making it almost unrecognizable. People you know can also look entirely different. In reality, nothing has changed. It is just that the person sees unreal scenery because they are watching from a different area of the alternative's space. In non-lucid dreaming, the mind relaxes its control even further, which is why the soul flies into very distant sectors where the script and scenery are quite unimaginable. In these sectors, anything is possible, starting with cloud 9 in heaven and ending in the kind of hell that would make demons and cauldrons a day out at the hell spa. The dreamer may end up in a technological world filled with huge clanking machinery, or they may find themselves in a world reminiscent of a slaughterhouse with nothing but dirt and piles of raw meat. You may end up lost in an unfamiliar city where all you can do is desperately walk the streets with no idea how you got there and where to go. People in such areas may be ugly and weird, and the animals wild and rabid. When you wake up from a dream like that, you experience a huge sense of relief. Thank God it was only a dream. And yes, it was a dream, but not an illusion in the normal sense of the word, an unrealized metaphysical reality. The scariest thing about it is that the dreamer sees all these virtual characters and can do whatever they want with them in accordance with their fears and expectations. God protect us from ever ending up in such a physical reality. When cosmonauts are in orbit, they apparently see quite unearthly dreams. For example, in his published diaries, Gennady Strekalov writes, "I have strange dreams. Sometimes I am filled with wonder and have no motivation or will to communicate. Clearly the brain, like a highly complex computer, malfunctions from exhaustion or receives external information from the planetary information field where everything is written and recorded for eternity." After experiencing dreams like this that could never have originated from ordinary human consciousness, the transurfing postulate on the existence of the alternative space would not have surprised this cosmonaut at all. A model of human perception is well described in the books of Carlos Castaneda and Thune Maris. Their model reflects the ideas of the Toltec, the last people to originate from Atlantis. According to their teachings, the human being is surrounded by a shining cocoon of energy consisting of numerous threads. Somewhere in the area of the shoulder blades, the threads join in a single focus called an assemblage point. The position of the assemblage point determines the nature of your perception. If you combine the Toltec model with the concept of transurfing, you could say that when the assemblage points are in their customary position, a person perceives physical reality in its usual form. In this position, physical reality coincides with the corresponding sector of the alternative space. If the point shifts to one side, the synchronicity is disturbed, and a person is capable of perceiving unrealized areas of the field. In most people, the position of the points is firmly fixed. However, when for various reasons the focus is disturbed and the points start to wander, a person develops clairvoyant skills. Naturally, our dreams are determined by shifts in the assemblage points. It is important that the focus of our perception not only shift to one side but also return to its former position. Otherwise, if it gets stuck in an unnatural position, the mind undergoes changes that are ordinarily referred to as insanity. People who are capable of intentionally shifting their assemblage point can shape reality and are lucid dreamers. This ability appears of itself if you return to the point of reference relative to reality, i.e., if you are conscious of how you really are. This is not an easy task. You can count the people who have been known to reach enlightenment on the fingers of one hand. Reaching enlightenment is like being in a strange city, desperately wandering along narrow, winding streets, and then soaring high up into the sky where you suddenly have a bird's eye view of everything below you. Like a line on the palm of your hand, the path to your goal becomes instantly obvious. Transurfing will not lift you up to the height of a bird, but it will show you a path you can walk along with your eyes closed. To wake up in a dream, you have to have a reference point. You understand that it is a dream when you remember that there is another reality, true reality. Your reference point can be the knowledge that in life you can raise your consciousness up a rung, or at the very least half a rung, and this of itself, is quite something. Imagine that you are walking along a street, talking to someone or going about your day to do chores. Wake up, look around, and with a sober mind observe what is happening. You are capable of setting your world in the right direction with the power of intention. The result will not be like a dream in which the storyline changes fluidly, submitting to the slightest movement of your will. Material realization is inert, like tar, but it can be manipulated nonetheless through the principles of transurfing. The first thing you have to do is wake up. Be aware that reality is like a dream. Only in lucid dreaming can you fully control the situation. When you are daydreaming, you are not in control of the situation. You are battling with pendulums. Come down into the auditorium and observe. Behave dispassionately, rent yourself out, and remain the observer. In order to retain your level of awareness, it is essential to keep a consistent control of the flow of your thoughts. When this becomes a habit, it is automatic and requires no effort. For once you have woken up in your dream, you no longer have to make any effort to maintain the awareness that it is all a dream. You can learn to control the flow of your thoughts in the same way. At first thought, you have to systematically call yourself to wake up before it becomes a habit. When in waking you remember that you are supposed to be acting dispassionately, you become conscious, i.e. you come down from the stage into the auditorium, or you remain on stage as a participating spectator. This is the half rung of awareness that is enough to carry out the other transurfing principles, the most important of which are to reduce your importance level, to go with the alternative's flow, and coordination. These principles enable you to move confidently through the labyrinth of life, avoiding all sorts of problems even with your eyes closed. Further on in the text, you will learn more about the next powerful instrument you can use to shape your reality, which is the dual mirror. We round up this topic with one more question. If somewhere in the alternative space there is a point of reference prior to your current life relative to which reality seems a dream, then what would mark the origin of its initial reference point? Obviously, God Almighty Himself. The soul of every living being is a part of God. Every life is a dream. You could continue to ask, is there an initial reference point for God Himself? Let those who like to be nourished by hope struggle with this question. It is the same as asking whether anything exists beyond the visible universe. We can never know. Just as butterflies collecting nectar in Africa cannot know that there is such a place as America and that flowers grow there too. Is not our world wonderful enough? Why should we constantly demand an explanation to everything when we could simply enjoy the nectar of the flowers we can reach? The children of God. From the dim and distant past, people have had the habit of ascribing exclusively positive traits to God-fearing citizens and accusing the godless of all kinds of sin. The devout citizens created the stereotype for themselves and for everyone else as a sort of presumption of their innocence. And the habit existed at the same time as horrendous atrocities that were committed and continue to be committed based on the goal that would supposedly please God, to persecute dissidents. But in reality, faith of itself does not make a person righteous. So how is it then that the followers of religion are so confident in their own infallibility, or rather their own righteousness, that even the atheists are prone to respectfully agree? They say, "We are the believers, we go to church, pray, and are the quintessence of everything spiritual and light. You are the atheists, and so you wallow in your sins. We are right, and you are wrong." The source of this confidence serves as a support point which a person acquires within the pendulum of religion. There is nothing it cannot give you. Confidence in God's mercy, forgiveness for one's sins, the absolution of guilt via repentance, belief in the kingdom of God, as well as hope that God will assist you, and a feeling of oneness with your fellow followers of the faith. Things are much more difficult for the atheists in this regard. They have to rely on their own strength, and there is nowhere they can be rid of their guilt. But why would a person strive towards God if they already consider themselves righteous? In many cases, it is not love for the All-Highest that draws people to Him, but feelings of fear and insecurity. There are people who believe that they are striving towards God with all their soul, but this is an illusion. What they are really doing is trying to escape their own ego. There is nothing wrong with having an ego, and generally it does not bother you unless it is offended. The ego is generated by dependent relationships in which a person compares themselves to others and discovers that they are far from perfect. The ego's only goal is to assert its own significance. If it does not receive this confirmation, it is insulted. When this happens, a person begins to experience a sense of inner discomfort, which they try to be rid of. How can this be done? If increasing your sense of importance does not work out, then there are only two things you can do. Either let go of the reins and let the ego gallop off, or suffocate it entirely. Those who choose the first method become egoists, while those who choose the second become altruists. Often, in an attempt to avoid the discomfort of being alone, the ego takes the desperate step of negating itself. The ego proclaims that to love yourself is bad, that you have to love others instead. A person then abandons care for their own soul and turns to face God and others, dedicating their lives to anything that will provide them with support. Sometimes the opposite happens. The ego is devoured in aggression, and people become criminals, villains, and cynics. Both the religiously spiritual and the fallen are a product of the ego. They just represent opposite polarities of the same process. You might believe that if you turn to God, you will manage to rid yourself of the ego. The paradox, however, lies in the fact that the ego is the very thing that is pushing you to search for God in the first place. God is inside you, not somewhere outside of you. There is a particle of God in every living being, which is how He governs the world. The ego worships some kind of abstract symbol, turning away from the true God, from their soul. Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and Krishna are all higher manifestations of the Lord. Ordinary people may not be higher manifestations, but they are manifestations of the same Lord nonetheless. So it works out that one manifestation worships another manifestation? What good is that? Striving towards God with the purpose of ridding oneself of the ego is the path of inner importance. Inner importance is always present when you give yourself up to be judged by others. Returning to self without looking around at others is the true path to God. If I eliminate the necessity to check the opinion of others around me, then I am self-sufficient and my ego will cease to exist, leaving nothing but my integral personality. Do not listen to others who call you to change and sculpt yourself into something that will match a certain set of standards. They pressure you to change, to turn away from your soul, and to follow the pendulum rule. Do as I do. Turn to face yourself. Accept yourself the way you are. Be yourself. Assert your right to be right. To dedicate yourself to serving an abstract God means to abandon your soul. And this is nothing more than adherence to the pendulum of religion. Such is the theosophy of transurfing that is not forced on anyone. I am not proclaiming absolute truths. I am simply trying to uncover certain lawful patterns. Everyone is free to draw their own conclusions. Naturally, religious figures do not like arguments of this kind, although you can come across people with all sorts of different beliefs and convictions, even among religious institutions. Zealous adherents of the pendulum of religion can be distinguished from genuine priests in the hostile manner in which they oppose all other dogmas. The assertive pressure they exert gives adherence to the pendulum away immediately. Fortunately, gone are the days in which adherents could get away with burning dissidents at the stake. However, conflicts over religion remain and will continue because no one has yet eradicated the pendulum's first law. Essentially, religion is communication with God via a mediator. You cannot get away without having a priest at the rituals of baptism, wedding, and burial. Surely God will not turn away his child just because they did not get baptized in time. If there is a particle of the Creator in all of us, surely then we are all his children. Do you require a mediator in your relationship with your mother or your father? Everyone must answer this question for themselves. The pendulum of religion is particularly harsh in relation to its adherents and calls them to give up all worldly pleasures. All spiritual paths tend to be linked with an ascetic way of life. It is commonly assumed that those that are enlightened achieve such heights on the path to spiritual perfection that they lose interest in anything remotely earthly. Do not get caught on this hook. Everyone can and must continue to take care of their material well-being, comfort, and general welfare. If that is not the case, then it indicates that a person is completely in the power of some kind of idea. Most probably, the idea belongs to one of the pendulums, be it of religion, philosophy, or some other spiritual area. In accordance with their second law, the pendulums force their adherents to dedicate themselves entirely to the interests of the structure. If a person gets firmly caught on this hook, then they genuinely lose interest in anything except the pendulum. A person can even find themselves under the power of the illusion that they are totally devoted to their own soul, or that they are having a conversation with God. In fact, the soul of this kind of enlightened being is immured in a heavy box, unable to make their true needs known. Why does the soul come into the material world? To prepare you for life ever after? That is total rubbish. If your soul comes into the world, regardless, why would it need to prepare itself for life back in heaven? If your soul comes into the world, regardless, why would it need to prepare itself for a life back in heaven? And is it even possible to prepare for that life here on the ground? Life in the physical dimension is a unique chance for the soul, which comes here from the spiritual world to experience all the joys of the material world. It will always have time to get back to the spiritual world later. What would be the point of depriving the soul all the amazing temptations this wonderful, miraculous, magnificent world has to offer? By dedicating yourself totally to the worship of God, you actually distance yourself from him. The Creator has made many realities through living beings as its living embodiment. God's intention is to experience all the facets of the reality he has created. This is the reason why he sends his children into the material world. God has given you the freedom of action, so enjoy your freedom. You do not have to lock yourself away in a monastic cell and spend long hours in prayer. This is not serving God. It is depriving him of the joy that one can experience from a full life. It is like refusing to let a child go and play outside, forcing them to spend all their time cramming. Adherence of the pendulum of religion will instill in you that you are incapable whilst God is all-powerful. The structure has nothing to gain from your freedom or your power. All it requires is hard-working, serviceable cogs for the bigger machine. The pendulums have already gone a long way towards enslaving the will of human beings. You can only imagine how great their influence must be for the very children of God to lose the memory of their own power and magnificence. Man was originally given the power to create the layer of his world by streaming potential alternatives from metaphysical space into physical reality. Pendulums have succeeded not only in eroding our awareness of our true abilities, they have also distorted our understanding of the meaning of life, substituting it with serving God via religious worship. It is highly unlikely that God requires us to worship Him. Do you require your children to worship you? Or would you rather they become good friends? The purpose of life and service to God lies in co-creation, creating together with Him. Many people believe that it is enough for them to believe in God. They believe in His existence and power. Okay, and so what? These people do not understand God. To them, God is a kind of abstract, inaccessible, and often frightening idol. They have been convinced that you have to worship God, follow the commandments, and lead a righteous life in order to prepare yourself for something, although no one can say exactly what. But belief is not the same as understanding. Prayer does not automatically facilitate communication with God. The language of the Lord is creation. You may accept this statement or not, but certainly there is no point in arguing or discussing it. It is not a philosophical issue, but a question of choice, and so there can be nothing more to say on the matter. You communicate with God by shaping the layer of your world, your reality. When you take joy in your creation, God takes joy with you. This is what true service to God means. Belief in God is above all belief in yourself and in your own strength as a creator. There is part of the Creator in each and every one of us. Make the Father happy. As far as you believe in your own potential, you will believe in God and carry out the words He spoke. According to your faith, be it unto you. The Dream Theater. As we said already at the beginning of the book, the primordial motive that underpins the behavior of all living beings is the need to somehow independently manage one's life. Any purposeful activity or process can be largely described as an attempt to control individual reality. Anything that happens in life can always be reduced to one and the same task: to establish control over one's immediate environment. So what does God do? The answer to this question is obvious and requires no proof. Creating and shaping reality is the goal and purpose of all life. No one would doubt God's leading function. The only question is how He does it. From the moment that the pendulums of religion began distorting the very notion of God, everything related to God became surrounded in a strange and paradoxical mystery. God does exist apparently, but no one has ever seen Him. On the one hand, God rules the world, and on the other, His activity is not directly evident. So we conclude that He is, but He is not. He is not, and yet He is. The paradox of this situation enables the pendulums to interpret and exploit the notion of God in any way they see fit. Without going into too much detail, the main reason for the distortion of God's true essence is a series of substitutes that have been brought about by religion. Serving God has been replaced with worship, and the obvious nature of His existence has been replaced with blind faith. Pendulums have declared man powerless in contradistinction to God's omnipotence. Man's primordial divine essence has been reduced to nothing, thereby annihilating his former connection with the Creator. In this sense, man is like a kidnapped child that has been separated from its parents and forced to forget its true origin and purpose. As a result, man has lost all understanding of his ability and power to behave as a creator together with the highest creator of all. The Son of God has been told that he is incapable of deciding his own fate, that it is his duty to honor the Father, from a distance worshiping Him as an idol. It is said that the children of God are incapable of anything and have no rights. Their life is totally in the hands of a despotic parent who will be merciful only if you obey him unconditionally with head bowed low. Once subject to the influence of pendulums, man was divorced from a worthy role of service and simply made to serve. This does not only apply to pendulums of religion. Atheism is also a kind of religion, only with atheism, everything works the other way around. Here faith has become ignorance, ignorance negation, and negation outright denial. Yet whatever worldview a person chooses, their position is essentially the same. The pendulum of religion places fate in the hands of God, and the atheist in the hands of providence, or the power of circumstances, which it is customary to fight against. In both cases, man is attributed the unenviable role of the puppet. Either pray and await the mercy of God, or jump into the battle and fight the obstacles, because nothing happens just like that without a struggle. Whatever you do, however hard you struggle, you remain under the power of the pendulum and circumstances until such time as your actions go beyond the limits of inner intention. We always receive the things we choose. If you believe that your lot in life is to wander through a thick forest, then you will have to stumble through the fallen trees. But if you can permit yourself the boldness to believe that you can reach up into the sky, you will soar about the forest and fly freely. No one is holding you down except for you. You will not believe that you are capable of receiving everything just like that, no conditions attached, with the help of outer intention, unless you can accept the fact of your own divine essence. This is very difficult to do because the essence of God has been distorted beyond recognition. From Creator, God had been turned into a ruler demanding worship. And what does a ruler do? The ruler assumes the role of judge, dishing out justice, punishment, reward according to just deserts, issuing commands, and finally helping and looking after his subjects. Yet in the real world, we see none of this. Instead, we see abuse of power and lawlessness. The righteous suffer while the sinners go about their dirty deeds unpunished. Justice triumphs at a stretch. Appeals and prayers fail to bring results you want, and yet why would not God fulfill your request and ensure that justice is done, given that he is all-powerful? In order to explain the obvious discrepancy, the pendulum adherents interpret events to adjust the scenario to fit the specific role they have ascribed to God. They use all kinds of fabrications and inventions like, "Such is the will of God," or "Each will receive what is due us when we finally stand before him." You would think that people were naughty children who had run away from their teacher and could get up to all sorts of mischief before being finally caught and harshly punished. If you put all speculation to one side, what is God's real intention? To answer this question, we will not guess or philosophize, but simply state the fact that the intention of every living being, one way or another, is to control their reality. Not judging, dealing out justice, fulfilling wishes and requests, not rewarding according to merit or punishing, not ruling over people or looking after them. The control of reality is what it is really all about. No one can do anything that God does not want them to do. Everything really is under his control. It is just that he does not rule in centralized fashion, sitting high up on a throne, but through all living beings. Could God really rule the world if he existed somewhere outside of it? Every living being carries a particle of God, and so the intention of an individual being cannot fail to coincide with his intention. By placing a soul as a part of himself in every living creature, God gave them the ability to control reality according to their consciousness. All things have the quality of consciousness, beginning with man and ending with minerals. Naturally, man stands at the upper rung of consciousness, but this does not mean that stones are not living their own kind of life. They just exist in a different temporal dimension. Everything that exists in reality contributes to how it is shaped. Rivers make the path for the riverbed. Mountains rise up amidst plains, deserts, and forests. Land and sea are constantly competing for territory, for each is endowed with a portion of consciousness, and so strives to control its reality. The higher the level of consciousness, the greater the capacity for control. Take plants, for example. Plants are a commonplace part of our lives, and yet they are also quite mysterious. No one would deny that plants are living, but few would consider them alive in the full sense of the word. People see plants as soulless biological material incapable of feeling an awareness of self or others. This, however, is a huge misconception. Plants have their own type of nervous system. Their cells exchange electric potentials. These incredible beings can also, in their own way, see, hear, feel, taste, and perceive smell. Moreover, they can communicate with each other. They have the capacity for memory, analysis, and even concern. Cleve Baxter, the American researcher, once carried out an experiment in which he connected a plant to a lie detector. 2 people took part in the experiment. One broke the stem and tore off leaves. The other was caring and spoke to the plant affectionately. The plant learned to distinguish between the 2 individuals. When the bad person entered the room, the plant screamed, and the polygraph registered a sharp rise. And when the kind person approached, the plant calmed down. As a result of his experiments, Baxter came to the conclusion that plants are capable of perceiving electromagnetic fluctuations and even thoughts. The participant only had to think about pulling off a leaf, and the plant reacted vigorously. Baxter's research was tested by other academics several times, each time producing the same result. In one laboratory where similar experiments were being carried out, a house plant gave clear signs of the feeling we call love. A female lab assistant who used to remove the plant from the encephalogram noticed that it purred when she watered it and spoke to it in a soft voice. As soon as she entered the room, the flower would display great delight, and yet it would show no reaction to any other of the lab personnel. And imagine how surprised the researchers were to discover that the plant had started displaying signs of jealousy. If the object of the plant's love even began flirting with a member of the opposite sex, the flower would fall into a state which can only be described as depression. And it is not just plants. Researchers have shown that even DNA displays the beginnings of primitive responses. The energy transmitted from a DNA molecule placed in a spectrometer carries information not only relating to its structure, but also, and this is the most amazing part, relating to its mood. When the molecules feel comfortable, their radiation is calm. When the spectrometer cell is heated up, they begin to scream, responding to the excess heat. Once the heat reaches a certain temperature, the molecules are destroyed and die. The most incredible thing is that even in an empty cell where DNA molecules have been destroyed, their death screams can still be heard for 40 days subsequently. The spectrometer registers the phantom radiation of dying particles that are no longer physically present. These results were first obtained in the mid-1980s by the Russian scientist Peter Garyev, who worked in the Institute of Applied Physics, USSR Academy of Science. The official line of science, as one would expect, takes a very skeptical approach to these experiments. Plants cannot cry out loud, nor can they assert their rights, communicate their feelings or concerns. But they do have a soul, and they too are capable of suffering and of experiencing delight. It is just that plants, in comparison to man, are in a deep sleep. They are like a person who is sleeping who smiles in their sleep when they recognize an affectionate voice, or frowns when they hear a hostile shout. These wonderful dreamers serve as a source of life. They beautify our world and give us everything from a cup of healing drink to shade on a scorching day. And with all that, they make neither demand nor complaint. Although perhaps less clearly, plants are capable of feeling all the things we do as humans. They love us when we take care of them and try to thank us with their fruits. It is embarrassing to think what they must feel when we insult them. What must a tree feel when a more developed but heartless two-legged creature comes past and breaks off its branches? Fear? Pain? Insult? Is it possible to convey the horror that grips this defenseless being when a two-legged creature approaches it with an axe? Is it difficult to imagine the suffering a tree goes through when the axe sinks its blade into its body, causing life to slowly fade away? We will never know what plants feel, these silent witnesses of human cruelty that treats them as if they were mere biological material. We can only hope that they sleep deeply enough not to experience suffering as acutely as other creatures that are further up the consciousness ladder. There's nothing that can be done. The world is a cruel place in which one life exists on account of another. Yet this does not give anyone the moral right to consider that in this world of dreamers, only they are endowed with a soul and with awareness, and so have the right to treat others with neglect or disdain. There is a reason why in cultures that have not yet been spoiled by pendulum civilizations, the people ask for forgiveness before killing an animal or felling a tree. Followers of Buddhism, for example, always look where they are walking to avoid unintentionally squashing an insect, or will avoid treading on the grass if there is a path they can walk on. All living things deserve respect, and in this world, everything has equal rights. And if a person does not agree with this opinion, what is their worth? In comparison with all other inhabitants of this planet, human beings are only relatively awake, but no more than that. For life is kind of a dream. We are surrounded by an incredible world inhabited by dreaming beings. Every one of them lives out their own dream and always wants something, is striving towards something, and has its rights and its goal. Every living being has its own purpose. But why does it? What for? Asks the person who considers themselves to stand at the pinnacle of perfection. The process of striving towards one's goal is the driver for evolution. Evolution is the manner of creation, shaping reality chosen by God Himself. The notion of evolution arose comparatively recently. Previously, it was thought that the world is not subject to fundamental change and exists in the form that God originally created it. The essence of evolution can briefly be characterized as a consistent process of quantitative change gradually transforming into qualitative change. Charles Darwin was the first to clearly demonstrate this idea in a biological context. According to Darwin, the driving forces of evolution are genetic variation and natural selection. Variation is what generates new traits in the structure and function of a given organism, while genetics consolidate these traits. The battle for survival results in the preferential survival of the fittest. Darwin's theory works, and yet it overlooks one major question. What determines variation? Natural selection and genetics eliminate or consolidate various traits as accomplished facts. But where do these traits come from? What causes them to appear in the first place? Why does a species grow fins, claws, fur, horns, etc., when they did not have them previously? In evolution, one can observe jumps, lapses, backward movement, and the appearance of fundamentally new forms which, from the point of view of an ordered picture of evolution, defy explanation. For example, it has proved impossible to establish a chain of development for the emergence of organs of sight. How did we end up with the capacity for this sight? Sight represents a jump in evolution, a fundamental change that must have been more than a mere random development. And what of the origins of life? Should we conclude that one day the genetic code for life just happened to appear as pure coincidence? From within the context of the transurfing model, one draws the obvious conclusion that variation is shaped by intention. Every living being creates the layer of their world, including itself. The striving to control reality includes the goal of achieving this in the best way possible, and this requires changing and adapting to one's environment. The intention of all living beings from unicellular organisms to man himself can be expressed in the following manner. In my being and my behavior, I strive to act in such a way that allows me to effectively control reality. This intention materializes corresponding sectors of the alternative space, as a result of which new traits appear in the physical. For example, it is a known fact that the earliest species of bird had claws on the ends of their wings, which enabled them to climb trees. It is likely that before these birds learned to fly, they had to climb up a tree to gain height, take off, and then soar. Controlling reality in the form of, I climb trees, is not very effective. It would not be a bad thing to add another function. I can soar and glide towards the ground. And it would be even better to add, I fly freely. The intention to fly freely gradually materializes ever new alternatives into reality, each one an improvement on the last. Consequently, over a long period of time covering many generations, sectors are materialized in which wings take on ever more perfect form. There are destructive as well as creative processes in evolution. Both the first and second pendulum law apply here. In the process of evolution, pendulums fulfill a destructive as well as a stabilizing function. Their never-ending battle leads to one species being squeezed out by another, or to their complete extinction. On the other hand, pendulums also synchronize the intention of individual living beings. How else would the same traits develop in the population of a single species across an extensive geographical habitat? All development in the material world takes place as a result of the combination of internal and external factors, such as in this case, the striving of individual beings and the activity of pendulums. This is how God creates reality and rules it through the intention of all living beings. Our world is a theater of dreams in which God is audience, writer, director, and actor all at the same time. As a member of the audience, he observes a play which is unfolding on the stage of the world. As an actor, he feels and experiences everything the beings whose role he is playing experiences. This seems to be God's objective, to experience everything one possibly can in this kaleidoscope of dreams. So why is it that there is so much injustice and tragedy in the play? Why does he let this happen? Pendulums are a worldwide source of evil. Does he really endorse their existence? There are no answers to these questions. God's motives are known only to him. We can only state the fact that as writer and director, he gives the play the opportunity to unfold freely in accordance with the intention of the participants. Each player makes their contribution to the shaping of reality, as a result of which the overall picture is compiled. God's dream, woven from a variety of dreams, his individual manifestations in the form of all living beings. The questions to which we cannot provide the answers do not actually matter that much. there is just one significant conclusion we can draw from all that has been said above. God has given every living being the freedom and power to shape their own reality in accordance with their consciousness. Depending on the level of consciousness, life either turns into an unconscious dream in which the dreamer is powerless and at the mercy of circumstance, or into a conscious dream, which can be controlled and shaped with the power of intention. Everyone is given the freedom of choice, but very few people make use of the privilege. Why else would the process of evolution extend over such a long period of time if intention is capable of realizing necessary sectors of the alternative space? Hardly any living beings make use of the power of intention consciously and constructively. In unconscious dreaming, it is as if they vaguely desire something, but are not aware of what exactly. Intention becomes blurred, indefinite, and unaccountable. In this sense, man has not progressed any further than the animal kingdom. As we have said previously, pendulums have not only eroded man's ability to control reality with the power of thought, but have deprived him of the knowledge that such a thing is even possible. Drawn into destructive pendulum games, man can only enjoy the backlash effect of outer intention, realizing their negative relationship to life and their worst expectations. In all other things, the individual is limited to the narrow realm of inner intention and forced to achieve their goals only by investing massive effort. A person with a relatively high level of awareness is capable of escaping the circle and transforming their life into a lucid dream in which reality is subject not only to direct influence, but to their will also. If there is a particle of God in each and every one of us, it means that our intention is also the intention of God. By shaping our reality with the power of intention, we fulfill the will of God. When you express an intention, consider it to be God's intention. How, then, could you have any doubt that it could be fulfilled? And all you have to do for this to be is simply claim your right to it. Do not ask, do not demand, do not struggle, just create. Shape your own reality with the help of conscious intention. Would God really ask himself for something to be given him? Is there anyone alive from whom God would demand something from himself? God just takes whatever he wants. When you pray to God, it is exactly the same as if God were praying to himself. When you ask God for something, it is the same as if you were asking yourself for it. You can look at it the other way around too. You are praying to yourself and asking of yourself. If your intention is the intention of God, then who do your fears and doubts belong to? Also to him. He gave you the freedom of choice. It is within the power of your will to choose whatever you want. When you choose a tough path, you struggle to achieve your goals, having to overcome all sorts of obstacles, and this is inevitable, for you are convinced that nothing is given just like that, and so you receive according to your belief. Is God so powerless that he would have to struggle? He does not have to waste his efforts on the battle with any unyielding reality. He is capable of shaping a new reality in whatever way he desires. People can do just the same if only they can accept the idea that it is possible. So what is to stop you from waking up into the dream and exploiting your former privilege? If you are ready, the rest is just a matter of technique. The next part of this book will teach you how. Summary. The world is like a dual mirror. Material reality is on one side and the metaphysical alternative space is on the other. The individual perceives reality in the way they have been taught to. Life is like a walking non-lucid dream in which the individual has no reference point for reality. Come down into the auditorium and observe. Act dispassionately. Rent yourself out and remain the observer. Reducing importance levels, going with the alternatives flow, and coordination will enable you to navigate the waking dream with your eyes closed. The life of every living being is one of God's dreams. The purpose of life and likewise service to God lies in co-creation together with him. The process of striving towards a goal is the driver for evolution. Species variation in the process of evolution is conditioned by intention. God creates reality and controls it through the intention of everything in existence. The gift of God to every living being is freedom, and the power to shape reality according to its consciousness. If you express an intention, consider it the intention of God. How then could you doubt that it could be fulfilled? Do not ask, do not demand, do not struggle. Just create.